If you're a neurodivergent person, dating has probably felt extremely difficult, if not impossible for you. And I want to talk about why that is. So, one of the main reasons why dating can be difficult for a neurodivergent person is because of the extreme sense of self awareness that we tend to possess. And the reason why this makes this difficult is because we tend to look at everything through the lens of our own experience, our own behavior, the way that we would process the world. And I know that for me personally, this made things difficult because I often looked at other people's behavior as a reflection of myself in some capacity. And I often blamed myself in relationships for everything that was happening. So, to give you an example, if somebody was behaving in a hurtful way towards me, I would always take that on and self reflect on it as, to try to understand why I had allowed that behavior to occur, or what was going on within me that had, what role had I played in that situation. And this is actually a really great quality to possess, to be self-reflective and to be able to reflect on your own behavior and take accountability for your own behavior. But at the same time, two things can be true. So you can have a role in the dynamic, and that is true. But someone else's behavior can also be unhealthy or toxic or dysfunctional, and that is not a reflection of you, right? And it took me a long time to kind of learn that both of those things can coexist, that both of those things can be true, and that I am not responsible for other people's behavior. And at the same time, what kind of goes along with that is holding self-punishment around that, right? So looking at the ways that relationships have not worked and the mistakes that I may have made in relationships and the wrong choices I may have made, and kind of punishing myself for those things. So holding on to these mistakes and thinking that those things are a reflection of my own worthiness in experiencing something that feels healthy, loving, and good. So I think that a lot of neurodivergent people kind of struggle with these similar lessons in learning how to relate to others while also being extremely self-aware and self-reflective. So the second thing that I wanted to talk about that I think is really, really common for neurodivergent people is expecting people to behave the way you behave, or expecting people to have the same intentions that you have. And this is a lesson that I have had to learn many, many times over in my life, like entering into relationships. And I think that a lot of people would call it naivety, but it's not really naivety. And this is again an example of like self-punishment, right? Because I used to consider myself to be, naive or gullible, like to have gotten myself into certain situations. But now I'm like actually finally able to recognize that I just operate differently than other people. And that doesn't make me weak, right? It just means that I need to be aware and protect myself and have boundaries and understand how to, trust my intuition and how to let people in a way that feels safe, right? And so when we're talking about like expecting people to behave like you, if you are, I kind of, this is something that I've thought about many times in my life, is that there's kind of people operating from two different directions. And when I'm just having this epiphany right now as I'm thinking about this, but it's like maybe this is the distinction between neurodivergent and neurotypical, but it's like there are people that are heart-centered and they move from their heart. And then there are people that are ego-centered and they move from their ego. And so when you are a heart centered person, or when you are a neurodivergent person and you are moving from a place of genuine intention, you are moving from a place of authenticity, you expect other people to meet you there. And it's like a really rude awakening when you come to the realization that a lot of people are not trying to meet you there, right? They don't have pure intentions, they don't have good intentions. So I've often in my life been blindsided by behaviors that are unfamiliar to me, right? So, like, you wouldn't expect someone to be manipulating you or lying to you, like, until it's happening and the truth comes out, right? Because, like, you are not acting in that way, and so you wouldn't expect someone else to act that way. And I will make the distinction here for neurodivergent women in particular. I think something that you have to really look out for is protecting yourself from being used, because I think it's something that's like deeply ingrained in patriarchal society, that like many men, I won't say all men, but many men feel entitled to the objectification of women, that women's bodies, women's existence in its entirety exists to serve men in some capacity. And men will often find ways to use you if you don't protect yourself. And especially if you are a loving person, a kind person, a giving person, a heart centered person, a person that, wants to pour into others, you just have to be careful that you are not pouring into people that are just looking to take advantage of you and just looking to take from you, right? And again, I would love to hear the experience of neurodivergent men who feel like they are often pouring into people that take from them as well. I'm sure that it exists and that it goes both ways, right? I think this is just again, the difference between being a heart centered person and an ego centered person, right? So, another thing that I think separates neurodivergent people is our capacity to identify our own feelings very early. So, because we are very deeply self aware, we are able to quickly know whether something is for us or something is not for us. And so, I think, when I look back on my own experience and I look at many people who have liked me and been interested in me and wanted my attention, and I was just simply not interested in them back, it would never have occurred to me to like use them for attention, right? Or to like lead them on to see like what I could get from them. And so if I, could feel that somebody had feelings towards me that I did not return, I would make sure that I didn't, you know, get myself mixed up in a situation that I didn't want to be in. But the inverse is often not reciprocated, right? So like you will experience people doing that to you if you don't learn how to identify when people, red flags, identify when people are being genuine with you. And there are definite ways to be able to tell that. But I honestly think that that's like a very personal journey of like learning how to identify those things and how to understand them. It's like one of the greatest gifts of being a neurodivergent person is pattern recognition. So with every situation, if I am talking to, a younger person out there who's like, just starting out in your adult life and starting to have these kind of confusing, weird experiences in relationships, just start to notice patterns. Notice why certain relationships end. Notice how relationships begin and what similarities there are, because the sooner that you pick up on the patterns, the sooner you can break the cycles and you can recognize, like, oh, okay, I can identify really quickly now when somebody is lying to me, or I can identify really quickly when somebody is not being genuine with their intentions. So I think that that is really important. Um, I think that for a neurodivergent person, we are often driven more by connection and less by trying to cultivate a specific outcome. And again, this is a good example of the difference between operating from the heart versus the head. Because when you're operating from the heart, there is a certain surrender that's happening where you are co-creating your experience with life. And so you are flowing with life. You are just trusting your path, right? You're not trying to control your path. And I think people that are very ego driven, they want their life to follow a specific outline. And so they are looking for specific outcomes that need to happen by specific times. And so dating, like the modern version of dating and what people are really doing, almost feels like they are interviewing someone to fill a position, right? So like if you are looking to get married and you are looking for your husband and you're going on these dating apps and you're going on hundreds of dates, it's like job interviews, right? Like you're sitting down with a candidate and you need them to check certain boxes, and it's very transactional, right? And I think most neurodivergent people are not looking for that type of experience. They're not looking for a role to fill. They're looking to experience connection. And with that said, I think that relationships for neurodivergent people can often be catalysts, they can be initiators. And so you can experience these very deep, very soulful, very powerful connections that really change you, that really initiate you into new levels of growth as an individual. And that is not typical. And because you are a very deeply feeling person and you understand the world very deeply, it it is a challenge to be met where you're at. And people can often come into your life to trigger aspects of you that you still need to heal. They can come into your life to show you certain aspects of yourself that you're ready to see and embrace. And because of that, relationships can be very intense. They don't look the same as like a normal relationship. Like, they can be short but extremely meaningful and deep and powerful. They can be, you know, they can look all different types of ways because you are basically unlearning everything that you've been taught about relationships and about love and about yourself. And you are figuring out how to come back to your soul essence. And you are figuring out how to embody a different, more expansive understanding of love and human connection. And so there is no guidebook for that. There is no roadmap for that. Like you are basically like a pioneer setting out on an unknown trail, right? And the world can be hostile. It can be, you can learn some heavy lessons, right? But everything is a part of your path towards that higher mission, that higher calling, especially if you feel and have always felt very deeply called in your soul to partnership, to relationship, to love. I know that some neurodivergent people, and like I've said in my previous video about neurodivergence, I myself am just learning to embrace that label. And I think that there are a lot of things that can fall under that label. And I know for some people, relationships are not a focus at all. And a lot of neurodivergent people are very, you know, on a different journey of self-awareness in that regard. But I'm talking specifically to people who feel a soul's calling within them to relationship, to partnership, and have really struggled feeling different within that and feeling like the way the rest of the world operates in relationships just does not resonate for you. And I think experiencing these very intense transformational relationships that are catalytic, it can often take a long time to get over these experiences. And it's not even, that you're holding on to that person necessarily, although that may be part of your journey, is learning how to break codependent cycles, how to let go when maybe you've really struggled with letting go of the people that have touched your heart that you love. Um, but part of the time that it takes to move through these experiences is that you are processing and upgrading your system, right? Like you are transforming to your next highest level. So I hope that that makes sense. And I also wanted to touch a little bit on the fact that this doesn't just pertain to romantic relationships, right? Like friendships can even be a challenge. You know, when you are a very self aware person and you have a really strong center, that can often make you a target for other people's projections. It can make people want to latch on to you as their emotional support system. And again, this is all, teaching you lessons around how to have boundaries, how to protect your own energy, and how to break codependent cycles and fully rise into your own self-sufficiency, right? And like embracing your uniqueness and your new unique path and individuality, and recognizing the beauty in not needing anything from anybody else. So what do relationships look like once you have learned not to need from other people, but to only desire, to only act from reciprocity, to only, you know, build from a place of love and support and intimacy, being able to see yourself and another deeply, right? And so I think that that's a very different template from what we've been so deeply, deeply ingrained to think and understand about relationships. Like, I know for me personally, like something that I've really had to work through is letting go of the idea that your existence only has value in relation to other people. So, like, in relation to whether you're partnered, in relation to the quality of your friendships or how many friendships you have in your life, or how, you know, busy you are, or like what is this picture that you can paint of, you know, your social life and whatever. There's so many ways that there's like this pressure put on us to define our self-worth through the lens of like our relationships to other people. And I think that if you are on this path and you do feel called to a different way of looking at relationships, you also have to be comfortable with being by yourself for part of that journey, and embracing your solitude and embracing being alone and learning how to harness the power of your own energy through that solitude. So I just kind of wanted to share my experience with that a little bit. And I would love, love, love to hear your experiences as well. If you have any questions, any comments that you want to share. And I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day. And I'll talk with you again soon.